All right. He's not on the road this time. Would have been a great day for a watch party because he would have been able to be there. Jeff Paterson joins us now. We've got a lot of Canucks questions. We've got a lot of Elias Lindholm questions. We've got Jake and this is the thing, Jeff. I don't know how long you've been here, but I think I didn't even mention that part of that tweet from CJ was that the Canucks are trying to get Jake Guentzel. And there was another tweet, I think moments ago, from Darren Dreger that the Penguins would like to get a Jake Guentzel trade done by tomorrow evening. JPat, I'm sure you've seen the tweet. Just your thoughts on everything that's kind of going down right now on this Tuesday afternoon.
Well, it's getting spicy. And look, this is why we love this in this business. This is why fans love this time of year as well. And it's been too long since the Canucks have been in a position to really be buyers to, take a legitimate run at something. So absolutely edge of the seat kind of stuff. Now, I've seen others, so this isn't necessarily an original thought, but like if we play out this Lindholm rumor sort of, and if in fact the Canucks peddle him, it does lend some credence to this notion that maybe he was picked up as insurance if this organization didn't have certainty that it was going to be able to maintain or retain Elias Pettersson. Now that they've got Pettersson signed for 8 years, not that they don't need Lindholm because they need depth certainly through the lineup, but maybe that does free them up. I also think he just hasn't been a fit, and sometimes that's the case. And if you have the luxury of righting a wrong before the trade deadline and can flip him into something, now, Boston's not just going to take him off the Canucks' hands. They already have a Lindholm, and they're cornering the market on Lindholms, perhaps. But they're not doing the Canucks a favor here. So you'd need to see ultimately what the price to acquire Jake Guentzel is. But it does sound from all the insiders now like the Canucks remain in this. Is it going to turn into just this incredible arms race? Vegas is falling off the map here. If Los Angeles beats the Canucks tonight, guys, the Kings pass the Golden Knights in the standings. And knowing what we know about the Vegas Golden Knights in their brief time in the National Hockey League, they're just not going to sit by idly and flush a season. Like I don't believe that. They got Eichel back. I think they're going to get Mark Stone back at some point in the playoffs if they get there. So Vegas is interesting. Edmonton hasn't made its move yet. There are other teams, obviously, that would have some interest there. So, how far can the Canucks go, I suppose, is the question. I know that's getting kicked around. Whether it's Podkolzin, is this a showcase? Hglander having the season that he's having, and then the players that aren't in the NHL. So many moving parts. Again, it's hard to separate fact from fiction right now, but the fact that the Canucks are front and center in some of these reports from insiders is it's intoxicating to me because it just means that they are likely to pounce and make a significant move here to make an already good team that much better ahead of the deadline.
With Lindholm, how difficult do you think it is to evaluate that, yes, the fit hasn't been there to this point, but also he's only had a month to try and integrate himself. He hasn't had many practices because the team's spent a decent chunk of time on the road. He's kind of flip-flopped over, all parts of the lineup. How do you weigh those two factors in trying to understand, if you're the Canucks, whether Lindholm can end up being a fit down the stretch and into playoffs?
Right. And that's like, those are all important facts. Like, think about it. The guy was in Cabo for a vacation. He learns of the trade at 30,000 feet, heads home to Calgary, packs a bag, goes to Toronto, and then has to join this new team out on the road for 5, 8 of his first 10 out on the road. Team hasn't been playing particularly well. Not that that's all his fault. You would like to have seen him contribute a little bit more, but that's a massive thing. For a new guy coming to a new team, like, systems are different. Even if you're a veteran, and the fact that the Canucks had played, those 10 games in 17 nights, almost no practice time whatsoever. So if he makes it through the deadline and he's still with the Canucks, I think that 9-game homestand in the month of March would just allow a guy like that to exhale, to get some downtime, to settle in. Now, he may not be here more than 24 hours. Who knows how this is ultimately going to play out. But I do think that you're right, Harm, to recognize those factors. I think everybody wanted to believe that Elias and Elias were going to form this chemistry right away. That didn't happen. And I don't want to say the Canucks panicked, but, they tried each of them at center. Nothing really happened there. Then they moved him off that line, gave him a chance to play with JT Miller briefly. Then they felt that, no, he's a center. We're going to give him his own line. And, it's my understanding that he's trying to be a good teammate, but at the same time, he's had some questions about, like, what exactly are they doing with me here, to the point that, you're trying to get him going Arshdeep Bains played on his line for a couple of games. Podkolzin the other night. So now you got two guys that weren't even on the roster when he arrived here. Like that's got to, without a doubt, that's got to play on a guy's mind as he's trying to find his own game. And it's just been nothing but moving parts here. So I do cut him some slack, certainly. I expected a little bit more. He's been good in the faceoff circle. Been all right as a penalty killer. He gives them that right shot faceoff option, obviously. But they paid a big price. And if he's just going to be a third line center, I don't care who the player is. If you just told me the Canucks are going to part with a first rounder and others to get a third line center, I think they paid a pretty steep price to the Calgary Flames to make that happen. So again, we're going to have to wait here to see these next couple of days. If he gets through the deadline, he's still a Canuck. Ultimately, where does he slot in best? Some of it's on him to up his game. And I think a game like tonight's a big test for not just Elias Lindholm, but Elias Paterson and Pius Suter and some of these guys that don't necessarily have the engines always revving against the Los Angeles. We saw what the Kings did to the Canucks here in Vancouver last week, and there has to be some sort of response. I don't even care that much if the Canucks win the hockey game. I just need to see them look like they give a damn and compete, because they're going to see the Kings two more times before the end of the year. There's a pretty good chance they could see them in the playoffs as well. And their first run in with Los Angeles was forgettable. I think everybody, and it has to be a team effort, but I want to see particularly some of these guys, can they dig in a little bit more than they did at Rogers Arena last week?
They're going to have Carson Soucy in the lineup. How big was Soucy to this team when he was playing, and what do you expect to see from him tonight? And, knock on wood, as the weeks progress here.
Yeah, I had a good chat with him on Saturday. They practiced here in Vancouver and then flew, and I watched his interview with Jake Paterson after the morning skate this morning. He's trying to keep it pretty level-headed. He's a veteran guy. He knows that he's missed so much time this year. He's played 21 of the 62 games of the Canucks, or 63 games that the Canucks have played. So when everybody around him has played 60-plus games and you're constantly trying to get back in the lineup and find the speed of the National Hockey League and now the intensity of these divisional games, I think he's just going to try to, I don't want to say ease his way in, because I don't think he can do that in the National Hockey League, but, they're not looking for him to be a star, right? Like, that's not who he is. He's a complimentary piece who has been a nice addition to the hockey club. Again, I tweeted out their record with him. I mean, that's a dangerous game to play because it's not an individual sport, but it is undeniable when the team has one outright loss in the last 19 games that he's been a part of. He helps them without a doubt. And, he got back in the lineup in New Jersey at the start of that. Well, the start was in St. Louis, but he came back for the second game of that 7-game road trip, and there was no looking back then. But remember, when he got in the lineup the night in Jersey, Nikita Zadorov came out, and then they load managed Ian Cole a little bit later on that trip. So, he's only played 8 games since the night in New Jersey and the injury against Toronto, and there were 2 instances where they didn't have their top 6 defensemen. So we really haven't seen the Vancouver Canucks with what they would consider their top 6D very often. And now that Tyler Myers is out of the lineup, it's going to be a while still here. But the one thing that I always like watching with Carson Soucy on the penalty kill, how disruptive he is at his own blue line. Like, he's got reach. I don't know if he surprises some guys, because he's not Tyler Myers tall, but he's still a big, tall guy. But he's got an active stick, and he forces players to do things they don't want to do with the puck. And I think that's the sign of a good defenseman and a good penalty killer. And he seems to have that art mastered. So, it is a subtle thing within the game. But if you're watching and the Canucks are taking penalties, keep an eye on Carson Soucy, because I think he does some of his best penalty killing work at the defensive line, just sort of taking a stand and forcing some players into decisions that they would rather not make.
What'd you make of Podkolzin's season debut against the Ducks? And I know it's only one game, but are you optimistic that he can perhaps make a bit of a difference, even if it is just as a depth piece?
Yeah, look, I have to think that the timing of this is interesting in the week of the trade deadline, if this is some sort of showcase. And if that's the case, if that's the price, I don't think he's ever going to be the 10th overall pick the way that they had hoped on that draft day of 2019. When you look at a player like Matthew Boldy or Cole Caulfield that has already done terrific things in the National Hockey League, I don't think he's ever going to be at that level. If that's the price they have to pay to make some sort of significant deal, so be it. But based on what I saw the other night, I just thought he looked comfortable. And I thought he looked pretty confident, and he should. That wasn't his NHL debut where Arshdeep Bains was getting a taste of the NHL for the first time. This guy has played in the NHL. He scored in the NHL. That rookie season essentially had a full run in the National Hockey League. But I thought he was able to play his game from the hash marks down. I thought he did a lot of good things, controlling the puck, using his size to shield defenders and those types of things. I thought he looked at home with Garland and Lindholm in the first period, the middle of a line change, but on a bit of a rush there and laid the puck off to Besser for a pretty decent scoring chance. I thought, there was a good defensive play in his own zone to break up some duck possession, and he didn't panic with the puck once he had it, was able to transition and move it the other way. The one thing I'd like to see is him a little bit more of the wrecking ball. I think this team stands to, see an uptick in physical play. And I wrote about the fourth line at Canucks Army here in my weekly column. And I do think that there's still an opportunity for them to change some of the pieces there and maybe give it a different look. Rick Tocchet certainly seems to want more of an identity from the guys that they've got. And I think Sam Lafferty has a role, but I think he's got to get back to doing what he did in the first part of the season. Teddy Bluger's likely to be there unless they move him back to the third line with Joshua and Garland when Joshua gets back in there. But the fact that they've taken Lafferty out of the lineup, DiGiuseppe's been a healthy scratch, Nils Amon now, and that hasn't seemed to produce much of a spark in any of those guys, and they should all be playing for their lives if they want to be part of this team now down the stretch into the playoffs. And I would think a game like tonight, it stands to reason that they're going to have to be physical. And so I know it's just his second game of the season, but that's an area I'd like to see a little bit more from Podkolzin is, be the wrecking ball, get in and be an initiator. Don't just battle for pucks, leave your mark on guys and let them know when you're out there on the ice. And I think he's got it. He's got pro size. And so it wasn't an overly physical game the other night. I think this one will have a little bit more of an edge, and it was his first game at this level in a while. So, certainly a passing grade, but if that's the jumping on point for him, now I want to see him elevate if he gets chances to play against LA and Vegas, and, we'll see what happens beyond the trade deadline.
Jeff, this is our last chance to talk to you before that trade deadline that you just referenced on Friday. I'm going to ask you your parting thoughts. What do the Canucks get at this deadline? I'm convinced it's two wingers. I'm guessing a bottom six winger and a top six winger. That's what I don't think they're getting any defense. I don't think they're getting any defensive help. That's my final take up to the deadline. I want to hear yours.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've got bottom six help on my wish list, and I do think that there is some need, and certainly names have been floated out there on this show and lots of other places, but this smoke today really makes me think that the Vancouver Canucks have something up their sleeve to go big game hunting, and I wasn't sure that they were going to be able to pull it off, but they've got some creative minds, and we've seen a willingness certainly throughout this season and really dating back to last summer to make some trades when trades weren't happening. Now trades are going to happen at the deadline, and I would think that the Canucks don't want to miss out on that fun. Now, they are hampered by a cap like every team is, and so they don't have a ton of wiggle room. It's fine to have a wish list going into a trade deadline. I don't know that you're always going to be able to accomplish everything that you want. So, they would have a better sense on Tyler Myers' injury and the timeline there. They'd have a better sense on Dakota Joshua. Those are important pieces of information. Joshua has been skating a little bit, didn't practice on the weekend, but I have to think that, he'll be back at some point on the homestand. It certainly sounds like Myers, isn't out for the remainder of the season. So I would think that they would love to have a look at their top six healthy together. And I think they maybe believe in that, top two, obviously, and then the rest of the defense by committee. Is that the answer? I would think some people would say you can't go in a long playoff run with, a bottom four like that. It's you've got a top two, and then basically you have a bunch of sort of 4-5s. But I'm kind of with you, Dave. I think the more that I look, I think they have to, especially the way that Paterson's gone of late here. They need a little bit of help up front and to get him a legitimate scoring winger. If it Jake Guentzel, twice a 40-goal scorer, a guy with all sorts of playoff pedigree as well, that would check a lot of boxes for the Vancouver Canucks. So let's see if they can get it done. Again, it's going to be a fun run up to the trade deadline on Friday.
Jeff, good stuff as always. Oh, you had something. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to quickly follow up. If the Canucks go big game hunting, one of the pieces that they're presumably going to be asked about is Nils Höglander, considering he's already having success. He's really cheap. From your perspective, how reluctant should Vancouver be about the possibility of peddling Hglander as a chip for like a true top line type difference maker?
Yeah, I think they have to be harm. A guy at his age just turned 23, locked up next year, barely a bump above league minimum. And now you got 19 goals with 19 games to go. Like, he could be a 25 goal scorer without a sniff of a power play goal, or maybe he does throw a power play goal in there for good measure somewhere along the line. Tocchet praised him not only for his hustle and his determination in the goal the other night, but he was quick to point out he liked his defensive play. And, we haven't heard that a lot from Rick Tocchet or any of the head coaches that Nils Höglander has played for in his time in the NHL. And I just think he's continuing to round out his game. There's some chemistry there, a friendship with Elias Paterson. And as much as other teams certainly would ask about that player, I think there is just enough in their cupboards to put together a package to make some of these deals without parting with Nils Höglander. I think if you're trading Nils Höglander at this point, and I don't like to believe that there are a lot of untouchables, but boy, that's a guy that I would put on a list of players that I wouldn't want to move if there were ways around that to complete a big trade, but maintain a player that's helping you now. And I think, would be an asset down the stretch and into the playoffs, and then obviously at his price point for next year. So put me in the group that doesn't want to see them part with Nils Höglander.
I love it. I'm also in that group, Jeff. Who's on Rink Wide with you tonight?
Got Irfan Gafar, and we'll be in the Rink Wide studio post-game. I'm really looking forward to this, as I said. I won't go deep again, but I do think that there's an element of response required from the Vancouver Canucks. And I'm not talking about dropping the gloves and fighting. I'm just saying show up and compete, because they didn't do that against the Kings on home ice last week.
Good stuff, Jeff. It's going to be a great game, and people can check it out on Rink Wide Vancouver after the game. Thanks for doing this, Jeff.
You bet, guys. Thanks.
Canucks Conversation is live Monday through Friday, every weekday at 2 p.m. over on the Canucks Army YouTube channel. Make sure you like, subscribe, and interact in the YouTube live chat every day with us, folks.